Another thing is that Aisha Buhari is the least influential first lady. Least influential. Look at the level of influence that Senator Remi Tinubu, the wife, the current first lady, look at the level of influence she has. Aisha Buhari did not have that influence, was not allowed to have that influence. She was not. The influence that Senator Remi Tinubu has now, to the point that she told a sitting governor who was giving a speech that you have 5 minutes. If you don't stop, if you don't round up, I will off your mic. That kind of influence, Aisha Buhari did not have it. She was not allowed to. Look back to um, um, before Buhari, Jonathan. Think of Patience Jonathan. President Jonathan had more influence in Jonathan's administration than Aisha Buhari had during Buhari's administration. Look, go back. The wife of Yaradua had more influence. The wife of Obasanjo, before Stella Obasanjo, before she died, had more influence. Go back to the military era. The wife of Babangida had more influence. The wives of heads of government have had more influence than Aisha Buhari. And it lends credence to this point that she made, that she was not allowed. And they knew she was vocal, they knew she's educated, they knew she's someone who likes to express herself, and they felt that, oh, if they allow her, she's going to overshadow the cabal, and they didn't want that. And they sold seeds of to say, she wants to poison the president and stuff like that. You know, she wasn't allowed to, and she was the least influential. And so, considering that we had, they said the first lady position is not in the constitution, there's no constitutional provision for it. But then, considering the level of influence that first ladies have had in this country, and that Aisha Buhari was not allowed to have that level of influence, imagine the frustration it would be. Before the married for 35 years, you know, then before Buhari became president, they've been married for years. 2015 to 2025, 10 years, 10 from 35, that's what it called, 25. They were married for 25 years before Buhari became a civilian president, and they now did 8 years. So she knew what she's talking about. She knows what she's talking about. She knows the influence she could have had in that administration and why she was not allowed to. So you can imagine she is frustrated. She's frustrated. She's trying to gain influence. That didn't happen. She had to come out publicly and talk about it because she had no choice. So we have to understand, this is somebody who felt hot, that with the hope that was raised before 2015 when they got into power, and the disappointments that came afterwards. This is someone who is clearly not happy with what went on. And how, if she had had more say in the administration, possibly how that could have turned out differently. So this is somebody who is rightly upset, rightly frustrated by what took place. Yes, 2 years after they left at the administration, but till now we've not stopped talking about the failings and the disappointments and the things that the Buhari administration didn't do well. And anytime somebody brings it up, she, as somebody who ought to have played a major role in that administration, will feel bad that she was not allowed to. That people who were extended family members had more influence than she did. You know. So that too must be borne in mind. One other thing to note is that Aisha Tinubu mentioned that President Buhari was told that she's trying to poison him, and he had to be locking his room and preventing her access to him. You know, imagine being falsely accused of trying to poison your husband who is the president. How terrible that must be. Imagine that people who did not have um, access to him before now got access more than she. People who are extended family members, who Buhari was fondly close to, because he lost the father at the early age, and these people helped to raise him up, you know. And then imagine these people telling the president that your wife is trying to poison you. Then this allegation that the residence was bugged. It was bugged with listening devices. The people were secretly recording what was being discussed at their private residence, so that that information will now be used against her and her family, the first family. Imagine the level of frustration that your husband believed briefly that you were going to poison him. Imagine the level of frustration where you conversations which you thought were confidential, you now find it being bantered about, and the whole no other explanation other than somebody was listening in. So just imagine those frustrations that she had, and how troubling, how disturbing all these things would be to someone that, with all these experiences, it must really have a toll on her. And yes, she will need, with grief and all that, she will need people to really assist her. She will need professional help. But it's important for her to tell her own side of the story, which is important. It's important that people be allowed to tell their story, especially if they've lived the public life. Especially if they feel that their own side of the story is not being told. That people who have more platforms were giving their own perspective. So it's important that she be heard. Important that she tells a story. You know, one thing that happened was that, in 2020 with COVID, one of the people in the cabal, former chief of staff, Abba Kyari, died from COVID. You know, and then being one of the key people of the cabal, and he was late. There was this period whereby people were trying to gain influence after Abba Kyari left. And one of such people was Aisha Buhari. She tried to gain influence, to gain more access, then, but still it didn't work out. Things got so bad at the point whereby one of our aides shot his weapon in the Asurok villa. Our aides were arrested, some of our aides were dismissed. It was so frustrating. So frustrating that in the later part of Buhari's administration, Aisha Buhari was staying more out of the country, likely in Dubai. She was really frustrated out, and that's all those things, quite terrible. And then there are some other issues. So she had some controversies herself. Remember that student who criticized her that she was, gaining more weight and looking better, after getting into the administration. And then police went to arrest him, took him across several state lines to Abuja, and then the First Lady. So it was such a dark episode, a dark story. A student who was social media making a comment somewhere in school in the north had to be arrested and driven for hours, and taken to see the First Lady and all that. That was quite ugly, you know. So you had that incident, which I think was really unfortunate. You know, so then when she will spend more time in Dubai, people talked about, oh, she was spending more time in the country, but she didn't really get the influence she really needed. And based on history, the kind of influence that first ladies had, she didn't have that. So one wouldn't blame her if she felt that she didn't really have a place and had to leave the country, you know. So she's not without controversy, you know, and then um, she's now a widow. Late President Buhari is gone, you know, and she was asked if she would remarry. I said no. She's a mother, grandmother, and she has one husband. It's okay, you know. She's not. She doesn't want to marry again. It's not the question. It's a question of being pragmatic and all that. So I really feel for Aisha Buhari. I feel the grief. Not only the grief of losing your husband, it's the grief of when they were in power, how she could have contributed more, but she was not allowed to. You know, um, one thing that has gone well for her is her support for Tinubu. She supported President candidate Tinubu, and that's really has worked in her favor because you can see that Tinubu has really, gone out of his way to show his care for the family. When Buhari died, Tinubu made sure he was present. The wife has visited the First Lady in Kaduna and in Katsina. Tinubu himself, you know. So, and Aisha said this launching was done in Banquet Hall, Aso Rock Villa, you know. So, supporting Tinubu has paid off for her because Tinubu ended up winning, is now president, you know. And she has lovely children. And those children, going by the speech they gave, those children will do well. If they get into politics, they will do well. If not even into politics, if these children are appointed to be head of agencies, department, and the ministries, if those children will do well, I think their father really instilled a lot in them, you know, and they really look like people who can hold their own. So I just hope that they'll be given further opportunity to show that they are their father's children, and they are really holding their own, and they are not shy to talk about their experiences, and relate it as discussed in the book by Dr. Charles Omole. And they deserve to be heard. The children of late President Muhammadu Buhari deserves to be heard. The wife, the widow now, Aisha Buhari, deserve to be heard. You know, and we should, you know, allow them have their say, have their opinion. We should not quickly dismiss what they say. Some of them are opinions which may not hold up in fact. It may challenge with facts, but their opinions. People are allowed to hold their opinions, and when they live a public life, they are so allowed to express it publicly. They deserve our sympathy and empathy, deserve compassion, they deserve to be shown kindness. You know, I really hope that President Buhari's administration will do well. I personally was disappointed. I personally was disappointed with Buhari's administration. So, getting any clarity as to why that happened is important for me personally. So it's important to, we study historical figures We study the likes. The other time I talked about Alfred Nobel. The other another time I talked to some months ago. I talked about the discoverer of smallpox vaccine, Edward Jenner. You know, and I've talked about Rosa Parks. About women riot, Funmilayo Ransome Kuti, Margaret Ekpo. You know, Sawamba, Gambo, you know. I've talked a lot about public figures and all that, you know. The thing is that President Buhari is an icon, a great figure in our lifetimes, you know. Somebody who tried to contest several times, didn't win, eventually got to power 2015. So it's important to look at this man, look at his life from all perspectives, from all angles, and learn from the things he didn't do right and learn from what he did well. As a man of in his own personal capacity, as a man described with integrity, with humility, sense of humor and all that, and see how the children are really doing well and speaking well of the family, you know. So it's important to look at what they've done well and what they didn't do well, and see the things they did well, how we can emulate them. Where they didn't do well, where we can learn from areas why they didn't do well and the reasons why it happened. And current president Tinubu and future presidents should look back and learn from what President Buhari, learn from all these things. These things are lessons, so that when you get into office, we know that you cannot get into office and allow family members, you know, extended family, friends and all that to be dictating what happens in your administration, which is something that has happened in this instance. So we learn from this. And if you are going into public office or you are appointed into public office, you take note of this. If we can learn from this, then the story, the accounts they've given is not in vain, so that we can all learn from it. But if it all ends up with just mere debates and mere anger and mere insults, and failing to see the lessons we are to take from this, then we miss the point. We missed it completely. If our focus is only solely driven by how best to insult other people, how best to shut down other people, then we've missed it completely. Nobody is perfect. There are no perfect leaders. Our leaders are from among us, and we are all imperfect, and we all make mistakes. But if we could learn one or two from those who were before us and those who've passed on, we could learn something from their lives and see how we can better our own, especially when we get into public office, then it would have been worth it. Looking at their stories would have been worth it. Hearing from their family members would have been worth it. But if it just ends up dividing people and just pitching people one against the other and all that, then we would have missed the point. It's important to learn from the stories, to learn from the life of Muhammadu Buhari, and learn from these stories that are espoused in books like that written by Charles Omole. I wish the family well, the Buharis. I wish them well. No, there was a time that I heard a story. Somebody who had influence, a key political figure somewhere in the north. People used to flock to his house, friends and all that. Then at the point he lost his political office, he lost his connections, and then people stopped coming. It's just few friends that remained. The crowd that used to come to the house, they stopped. They stopped coming. So the Buhari's family, you hear the statement made by Aisha Buhari in the book. You'll be feeling that as well. When Buhari was alive, remember, his house became like It's just like people go to Ota to visit Obasanjo, and people go to Minna to visit IBB. So people were going to Daura to visit Buhari even after he has left office. And when he moved to Kaduna, people were going to visit. You know, when Buhari was alive, he still had electoral value. He still had that thing that politicians were coming to seek his hand of approval. You know, Atiku went and other people went to visit Buhari. You understand? Then now that the man has gone, those visits will stop, you know. And then the family could really feel it, the loss. So let's show understanding, let's show empathy, you know, and we can express our disagreements in a civil manner, you know, and we all should learn lessons from this.